Hey there, Dr. Charlie here. Welcome to today. Let's take 3 deep breaths together so we can connect our heartbeats with one another. I want you to breathe in. Maybe you connect with your heartbeat. I want you to breathe in and release. Breathe with your whole body. And then release with your whole body. One more time. Breathe in. And let your whole body release. On my mind today is the idea of shifting. Shifting is always happening at the literal global level of the shifting of the plates that create the Earth's landscape, at the collective people level where people are literally moving from place to place, but also sort of shifting their ideas and spreading their ideas. And if one person talks to one person, talks to one person, talks to one person, that it's kind of like that game Telephone, where the message may get changed each person it touches. And know that everything you touch, you change. That said that way, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower goes into greater detail about that. But change and shift and ending, beginning points, ending points, all of those are really on my mind today. The shifting of things is always happening, but are you shifting with it? An example of me not shifting with it, when in 2009, I started my first business, and I quit my job, and like the movie version of that. Quit my job, and I was in this kind of women's business boot camp with a brilliant woman. She gave us all sorts of techniques and ideas, and I used some of them, but not all of them. This in 2009, she was like, "Video, do video. You'll be way ahead of the curve." Even now, video is still ahead of the curve. And fairly quickly, like, I had a website, I had somebody do some designs on it, all of that, and I had basically a blog. I had articles that I had written, and at the time, 2009, it wasn't cool to look new. Whereas that's a little cooler now. It's a little more in vogue. But fairly quickly, I realized I had put about 30 articles up in 10 different categories. So again, I didn't look new. And it was pretty quickly thereafter that I realized that my target market at the time was young adult women going through what's termed the quarter life crisis, like 25-year-old women. I realized very quickly that they didn't have disposable income. They couldn't pay me for anything that I was doing. And never shifted. I never moved. I never changed what I was doing. I kind of put my head in the sand and was like, I'm just going to keep going and keep doing the thing that I'm doing the way that I'm doing it without ever changing anything. I did that for like 18 months, and then kept the website for like another 18 months until finally the website people were like, hey. And so it was one thing to have it taken away from me, but then they're like, well, if you pay us this, we can restore it. So then it was another thing to have to make the choice when I had been stuck with my head in the sand for so long with not making the choice. And so that's a really good example of me not shifting when things shifted. And I was very clear that things had shifted, and I never shifted with it. And I want to say it took me maybe 3 years after that, so maybe 6 years from starting, before I actually said out loud that my business failed. Because there was a lot of shame and a lot of other emotions, mostly shame and embarrassment. I was embarrassed that I couldn't get this right, and I'm so whatever. And I failed at my first business. So that was interesting. An example of me shifting when things shift, I am an expert at leaving things, places in particular. I've lived all over the United States, and it used to be every 2 years that I would get up and move somewhere else. Not little moves. I wouldn't move across town. I'd move across the country. I'd move 5 states away and just sort of pack everything up and go. And so learning to stay is on my current agenda. That is also the idea, said slightly differently, that relationships of all sorts, relationships with people, relationships with things, ideas, places, relationships of all sorts, they end. They have a beginning point, they may have a long middle point or a short middle point, and they may have an ending point. That is also a point of pivoting, a point of shifting. And what do you do when relationships with people or places or ideas, what do you do when they end? Sometimes they end abruptly. Sometimes they end abruptly for things that don't have anything to do with you. If someone dies, if someone moves away, and you kind of understand, whether or not you say it out loud, that y'all probably aren't going to keep in contact after that. Many of my relationships, part of what helps me thrive in a place is to connect with people, and often one or two of those people carries with me, and then often the other people in that specific place may not carry with me. We may not have the commonality of place, of location anymore, that keeps the thread strong. And so I encourage you to be like, oh, I'm notorious for jacking up a cliche. The reed that bends doesn't break, something like that. But I encourage you to bend. I encourage you to not be so rigid in the demands of relationships of all sorts, whether that's with people, whether that's with ideas. If you get new information, do you update your idea? Or do you just ignore the information that you got that was new and maybe pushed back on what you thought you believed or what you said you believed? That's called self-confirmation bias. You find the things you're looking for that essentially affirm what you already think, what you already believe. And that's true about regular, like ideas as ideas. That's true about ideas about people, places, things, other ideas. So that's a point of shifting and a point of pivoting as well. Do you do that? When you get new information, do you update your belief? And do you update your relationships with people when those shift? Sometimes they shift into a place that doesn't work for you anymore. I've had that happen quite a few times, and there's a grieving. There's definitely grief that goes with the losing of a relationship or the finishing or the ending of a relationship. And yet, there are always new relationships that ultimately take their place. And shifting into that, and perhaps coming into deeper understanding, and I'm speaking for myself here, that I'm coming into deeper understanding of not trying to hold on to the thing that is gone, and instead being present with what is, being present with the thing that is here now, even if it wasn't here a moment ago, even if I'm maybe lamenting the thing that was here a moment ago. And so shifting. Can I shift when shift happens? Because of course, shift happens all the time. So that's my question for you. That's my question. What's bubbling up for me, in me? And I bet if you're watching this, it's also bubbling up in you and for you. And that's also a shift in perspective. What if this isn't happening to you? What if this is happening for you? That's a lot for one day. Thank you for joining me. It is always my great honor and esteemed pleasure to share this time and space with you. If you are interested in the more that I do, feel free to check out my website, drcharliebrown.com. Until we meet again, take great care.